Welcome to Lab Notes. I'm Joe Fetterman with Colliers Life Sciences Advisors, and we have a really special session today. We talk a lot about the importance of the institutional research core in Philadelphia and how that has led to the explosion of cell and gene therapies in the region. Well, today we're joined by Heather Rose. Heather is the Vice President of Licensing and Startups at Jefferson, and she has direct vision and insight into the formation of these companies. Heather, welcome to Lab Notes.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it is a treat to have you. And before we dive into what's happening in Jefferson, you really have a remarkable story of how the sciences have been important in your life. I think it really goes back to early on, and I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, I was born with a strong passion for science. I have always excelled at it and loved it. So going back to some of my earliest memories, I recall sitting on my dad's lap reading Scientific American was actually a clear memory from my childhood. And, doing like the Invisible Man and Woman, I've always had a really strong passion for science and aptitude.
Your grandfather really was a formative character in your life. In fact, when we had the opportunity to catch up at your home, you shared with me one of the art pieces of artwork that he had. It was very touching. And it seems like his career as a physician was really influential in your development as a young person exploring science.
Immensely. In fact, one of the things that I have in my office behind me is his microscope from medical school. He graduated from Jefferson's medical school in 1947. He was a first-generation immigrant to the United States. My family were Jewish immigrants to the U.S. and struggled a lot here. And he went to Penn undergraduate, and then he went to Jefferson for medical school and had a drive and a passion that I hope I got a fraction of, honestly, and was just as passionate in teaching me about science. And as soon as he saw I had a love for it, he clicked in and spent a tremendous amount of time fostering my love of science, which is what led to me keeping his microscope here in my office and thinking about him a lot all the time in regards to my own trajectory.
Well, Heather, I have no doubt that you got more than a fraction of his drive. All we have to do is talk a little bit about your experiences with both the academic institutions as a student and also your involvement with the academic institutions on the research side here in Philadelphia. And I'd love to take a minute to talk about that because your career path has been just phenomenal.
I love this region. I totally love this region. I came here in 2003 to do my PhD at Penn. I worked in gene therapy there. I was in molecular biology mostly, I guess, as a kind of a center group, but I was working in a virology lab on focusing on making gene therapy safer. So on improving the safety of the directionality of where therapeutic gene doses were inserting into the genome. And then as I was finishing up my PhD, I thought, what's next? And had a bend towards intellectual property. So I feel very deeply, and I say quite regularly, that none of this matters if it doesn't get to the people who need it. And I started feeling very passionate about the translational side of science. And I went into law school, and I focused on intellectual property law at Drexel. And then while I was in law school, I actually interned at GSK's intellectual property department in-house and did some due diligence there. So I thought I was probably heading towards prosecution, but I really enjoyed the due diligence that I was doing at GSK, and I kind of liken it to popping the hood on a car that you might buy and checking the carburetor and checking, like everything, checking it out for soundness. I thought it was a great use of the breadth of my science and intellectual property knowledge. So do the patents say what they say that they say? Are they covered where they say that they're covered? And does the technology do what they say it does? And what's it really worth? How does it really compare to competitors? And my passion drove me into where I am now, which is, helping universities do that with their internal assets.
Yeah, and so you have a firsthand opportunity to look at companies that are growing. We've talked about some of those opportunities while you were at Drexel, and also now at Jefferson. And if you believe, you are a passionate advocate for funding and for bringing them to market. So, let's talk about really what is happening at Jefferson now. I think it's been based on our conversation, the companies that are emerging out of Jefferson are both interesting and advancing rapidly. And I'd like to hear both about your perspective on them before they came to be where they are now, and the path that they've taken to get there, and the role that you play. You and others like you in the institutions play a very instrumental role in getting these companies launched. As you said, if we're not delivering cures to patients, what's the point?
Exactly, right. If it stops here, it's not good enough, right? Like, if we don't get this stuff to the people who need it, we haven't done our job. And there's this whole side of things on the other side of the bench, right? You get these great results, these groundbreaking results, and then you need to do a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of fundraising to prove that they're safe enough and good enough to get into humans. And to get that money, you've got to protect your IP, and you've got to put in place good deals and find great partners, and that's what we do. We've had a great year from the standpoint of our company's fundraising and the traction that they're getting right now. I think generally the region, and for biotech, it's been obviously a good, interesting, dynamic year, right? It's been an interesting year. We just had an IPO, one of our companies that was founded jointly on technologies developed between Jefferson and City of Hope. Exilio IPO'd about 4 days ago and raised $117 million with their IPO. That was just a couple days ago. That's a targeted therapy for enhancing immunotherapies targeting to solid tumors. So it's a solid tumor immunotherapy enhancement tool platform. We have another company called Imbax right here in the region. It's an autologous cell therapy, keeping with that Silicon Valley, keeping with the strengths here in the region, the IQ strength and the strength of the students, right? I think there's a great strength here from the IQ, but also just from the manpower, right? There's these companies are drawing from students that are coming out of these amazing labs at Jefferson and at Penn and Temple and Drexel. We have these great labs, and then they're turning out these great students, and then they're feeding these great companies to have awesome lab hands that can do this stuff. So Imbax actually has now raised $166 million, and they're in a phase 1B for an autologous cell therapy for solid tumors. And right now they're looking at GBMs, and they've brought on a great team. One of their principals is the former CFO of Spark, John Fury. Another one of our companies, Immunome, also IPO'd last year within this fiscal year. And they've raised $93.9 million. They're located up in Exton. They've got a really interesting platform. So that's another cell technology. So they actually have a platform that can interrogate the immune system of a unique responder. So if somebody is a 1 out of 10 in the disease, so this one person doesn't have the disease trajectory of the 9 other people, they can look at what happened in that person's immune system, in their B cells, and pull out their antibodies and create therapeutics off of them very quickly. As you can imagine, the relevance of this to COVID was extremely high, and they were able to quickly create a convalescent plasma substitute. So they were able to quickly create basically an artificial plasma, which has a 3 antibody cocktail that works against many variants of COVID. They just recently put out a paper showing that they've got really strong activity across different COVID variants, and they're going to file an IND for that in Q4 of this year. Then they've got backup assets in immune oncology, and as you can imagine, looking at the immune system of unique responders in cancer can really tell you a lot about strategies for antibody therapies in cancer. That they've built a great pipeline of stuff behind the COVID, which was a matter of urgency, and they really rose to that occasion. And actually, we just got an announcement that our company MTTI, or Molecular Targeting Technologies Incorporated, has finalized their phase 3 in China for the world's first humanized rabies neutralizing antibody. So they finalized their phase 3, and right now they're going through the process of getting their site inspection, and which should be their final processes for getting to sales. So we've had a really awesome year, and this region has had a great year, right? I mean, I was reading just yesterday that I think it was $1.9 billion worth of venture capital had come into the region over the past year. No, I'm not surprised.
Heather, what a great story, and congratulations on your and Jefferson's participation in these. With that, I'd like to segue to something to talk a little bit about the institutional participation in the launching of these companies. We certainly know that that is now very much a developing phenomenon, which is both good for the companies and also good for the institutions that have incubated, elevated, and launched them. What is, if you can, what is the participation level of Jefferson in the companies that you've been involved with, and also personally for you, how involved are you these days? Having kind of nurtured these companies along, advised them. Are you still actively in contact with them? What is the aftermath of all these success stories?
Very involved. To answer your last question first, I remain very involved with most of them. And I'm involved from cradle to grave is usually what I say, or hopefully hopefully they don't make it to the grave while I'm here. I hope that they go to college and go on to something wonderful. So it's like drinking from a fire hose. It's like being the head of strategy at a company that does like everything, right? So we get at least 100 invention disclosures a year, or ideas. So we don't just want inventions. We want people to come to us with problems. I don't want somebody to come to me necessarily with a solution. We're a really large medical institution. I want people to come to me and say, well, I just know this shouldn't be this way. That's good enough. If somebody can come to me and say like this shouldn't be this way, this day and age, I will absolutely hire an engineering design firm and say, can we fix it? And innovate around it. Can we bring in innovation? And this is actually one of the reasons that our synergy with our East Falls campus, formerly Philadelphia University, was so awesome, because now we have design engineers on staff, and we have design engineers on our studentship. So we bring in design engineering on projects where we're starting off just knowing something isn't good enough. And then sometimes people come to me with fully baked stuff. Look, I knew this wasn't good enough. I have a solution. Anywhere along that spectrum. Then we have to decide, is there a market? Is there IP? Are there investors? And we have to make a plan. Are we going to invest in it to get it to a certain place so that it is IP protectable, so that it is investable? We'll do that. We do that quite a bit of the time. Are we going to IP file on it and then, try to get it invested in over the next year? So, it's a tremendous amount of strategy and thoughtfulness about what we're pulling up from the fray and what we're going to do with it. How best we get to a point of figuring out if it's going to fly or die, right? I mean, I do imagine it almost like throwing a bird up in the air to see will it fly or fall back to the earth. I want to give them all a fair shot, though. I really do. I don't want to. I'd rather find out I was wrong after a bit of trying than pass on something and just be a vacuum. I want to really give things a good shot and have smart people in the room to help me make decisions.
Well, again, congratulations on the 4 that you've given flight to. They are soaring, and we really appreciate the major contribution that you yourself and that the folks at Jefferson are making to the advancement of the Philadelphia cluster. It has been an exciting year here in Philadelphia, and we have nothing but future success to look forward to. We look forward to checking in with you soon to hear about 4 more new success stories. Heather, thanks again for joining us.
I only had time to highlight a couple, but we have over 60 portfolio companies in different stages, and I hit the Silicon Valley, current, in the news companies right now, but we definitely have an awesome pipeline. So I hope we get to circle back around and tell you more as we get more exciting updates. And I appreciate your time.
We will be back to talk to you. Thank you for
Lovely.
sure. Bye-bye.
Have a great day, guys.